If you're not currently driving a car or operating heavy machinery, try something with me. Close your eyes. Take a deep, slow breath. When you open your eyes in a few moments, see the world around you afresh. Imagine that you are unaware of any of the stories attached to any of the things that surround you. You're not afraid, it's nothing scary. It's just like a wave has come in behind you and washed clean from the beach on which you were walking the footprints which had marked your journey to get here. Everything still works fine, you'll just be seeing it all over again for the first time. You will open your eyes to a blank page. No story, no journey, no myth, no yesterday. Now go ahead and open your eyes. What around you would most capture your curiosity if you didn't already know its story and its purpose? We can reorder our world with our words and with the stories we tell ourselves and each other about how our world came to be. And we can reshape, even misshape it for others too. That's what authority is, the ability to write, to author reality. In this episode of Beyondering, we're going to meet a most curious man. Rob Bell is a wonderful person. By that, I mean curiosity and wonder are the defining characteristics of his approach to faith and to life. And his great skill is learning and maintaining a deep knowledge of the story of how we got here, balanced with preserving that wonder and awe as though he is meeting the world for the first time, such as we've just practiced. So join us as we meet a man who has taken seriously the responsibility of being the author of his own story. Oh, and you can have your memories back again. Shazam! Welcome listeners in podcast land. Whether you're like a cat on a hot tin roof, a dog just waiting for your day, an elephant who never forgets, or a goldfish that... Wait, what was I doing? This is the Beyondering podcast, where we explore faith out of bounds.
And that was Lucas. And I'm Matt. Hopefully you can differentiate us by now. In episode 1, we introduce you to the idea that every one of us wears a lens. And that lens is made up of all sorts of things, but for each of us, a really particular, a really unique set of factors that determine something, and that is how we see the world.
We want to show you the first lens that we're going to look at this series, curiosity. Now, you might be thinking, that's not a lens.
Curiosity is a lens because it's not assumed. Not everyone views the world with great curiosity.
Cheryl has worked 50 years of her life in the field of disability care and education. Recently, she explained to me how when working with people who have limits on their capacity and skills for communication, care must be taken to avoid making assumptions that you know what is going on for a person. Assumptions which might limit a person's quality of life and really limits the expression of their very identity. Cheryl spoke about a man who was living in one of the supported homes she managed.
Walls and things like that. I questioned what that behaviour was, what was the source of that behaviour.
She noticed that among this man's prescriptions was a particularly strong sedative.
And what happened was we took him to the doctor and had his medication reviewed, and he hadn't had his medication changed for 20 years, and he was put on that because he used to lash out angry way, and so they just shoved him on a sedative.
2 decades. Sedated. But Cheryl looked further into the man's family history and discovered the event that put the decades since into perspective. The passing of his mother.
And it was because he'd been an only child very close to his mother. And then when his mother died, his father didn't want to look after him anymore. So from an only child, then he had to share accommodation with 20-odd other people. And there was never any grief counselling or recognition that he might miss his mother or anything like that. So naturally he got angry.
Under the supervision of a doctor, the man's medication was adjusted over the following months, and his health was able to be more appropriately cared for.
What we saw was much a happier man. He was much more relaxed. You could talk to him. He's just a different person.
But none of it would have happened if Cheryl hadn't first been curious.
You just cannot face people and their behaviours. You've got to look at the reason and see if you can find out why.
I have a good mate, Lance, who's a secondary school teacher. One who has this incredible respect and valuing of his students.
I've noticed something that is quite common in staff room banter, and it's around the tags and the labels that students get given. Things like lazy, inattentive, rude, they just don't get it. Things like that get said.
Lance too was tempted to buy into this energy. However, had a moment one day when he just adopted this curious, questioning posture.
There's a couple of girls in my Year 9 class. They began this habit, this very repeated behaviour of sitting somewhere to the edge of the class, quite close to each other, and just whispering. It was a very frustrating thing for some teachers.
He realised that one of them had actually lost both their parents at quite a young age. The other was the 9th of 10 kids.
As I was watching them, the artist and the poet, the orphan and the youngest different kid, I had this thought that this conversation must be so necessary. It must be so interesting. And this conversation must be one of the things that sustains these girls, each of them in their own way.
One day he approached them in the schoolyard and sensed in their body language, here we go, here comes the teacher. And he saddled up to them and just said, you know, I love what you two have between yourselves. It must be so cool to have this friendship. I so often find myself so envious of your conversations and what it must be like to be able to and to want to chat to each other all the time.
I ask myself questions like, what do they need? Or who are they really? Or what invisible thing have they brought with them to school that means that they are not able to do anything else except this thing that they're doing? I've often found that very helpful, and it just seems to open up new ways for them to be and new ways for me to be. It lets me relax about things that ordinarily I should be really tense about and frustrated about, like whether they've got their work done yet or whether they're really listening to the pearls of wisdom that I'm giving them, or a whole range of things I kind of loosen my grip on a bit, I feel more relaxed about.
Their experience as students was that they felt seen and heard in a new way. And what changed was a lot. Their energy towards him, his energy towards them. In the classroom setting, they were more responsive, they were more open to participation and also to discipline. And for Lance as teacher, his whole energy was much more gentle and embracing and open and less frustrated. Curiosity is the quality that scientists most depend on to throw them into new areas of discovery. And curiosity is the starting point for all artists.
I've heard it said that the most important phrase in scientific history is, that's strange.
So we're going to interview someone whose almost hallmark characteristic is that of curiosity. His name is Rob Bell, a man familiar to many of you. He's a New York Times best-selling author and motivational speaker. He started out when he pastored a church at the age of 28. In 2011, Time magazine named Rob Bell on its list of the 100 most influential people in the world. However, something that we found curious is it's not always been smooth sailing for a bloke who for many has seemed to have it all.
So Beyondering is all about encouraging you to follow your curiosity, to bring it to the table, to wear it proudly. So in this episode, as we dive into our first interview of Season 2, we're going to ask you to strap on your curious ears as we dive in to hear about the lens of curiosity with Rob Bell. Well, Rob Bell, welcome and thank you for coming to Beyondering.
My pleasure. It's great to be here.
First question I feel like I should ask, with the writing of your book, Love Wins, when you did a speaking tour of that, did you come out to AC/DC's Hell's Bells?
I did not.
Oh, wasted
Missed
opportunity.
opportunity. Disappointing.
Go back and do it again.
Let you down from the very beginning.
There's a question we often ask all our guests to kick off with. What for you is the point or purpose of the Christian story?
There's more going on here. We aren't just a collection of our cells, synapses, and biology. This insistence that the whole thing has a beginning, middle, and maybe headed somewhere, and that everybody can be a part of it. And that in spite of all the brokenness and fragments and everything that appears to be going the wrong direction, is there something pulling the whole thing forward? And whatever that something is it big enough, wide enough, ineffable enough that it can actually take the dark, twisted, broken things and somehow absorb them, swallow them up, co-opt them, embrace them in such a way that even those things become somehow beautiful, which is all very mysterious.
Yeah.
So I even when you think about everything that you ate today to keep you alive was plucked from the earth, so it was severed from its life source. So even to keep living, you eat things that are dead. Your body, was it 300 million cells die in an hour, and yet your body produces 300 million new cells to replace them. So death and rebirth, death is the engine of life. It's the thing that's present in the very fabric of creation. The sun will set, then it will also rise again. In winter, everything dies, but then in spring, it sprouts forth. So this death and resurrection is a biological, a cosmological, a ecological truth baked into the whole thing, which I think is interesting. So at the heart of this Christian story that you speak of is about a death that brings life. But that's actually how the whole thing that's not a new idea. So when this story tells a story, it tells the story in language that people have acknowledged for thousands of years is how the whole thing works. It's not a weird aberration. It's not like, I just don't understand what does that have to do with anything? It's reflective of and in tune with everything.
Yeah.
It's not a weird explanation. It's how the whole thing has always been working.
Yeah.
I begin with what we can observe. And you begin with what you can observe, and then you try and name it. So essentially, when people talk about world religions, what they're talking about is naming systems, attempts to give language to reality. And some naming systems are terrible, and some are more adaptive, and some are actually quite powerful. So it shouldn't surprise us when naming systems overlap. I was just speaking at a federal prison in the States, and the imam came to my talk, and I had taught these prisoners a bunch of Hebrew words, which was just made me laugh. And he's like, "Oh, we have a word that's almost spelled exactly like that, and it means the same thing. And we have there's a word in the Quran for that. This is the word. It's spelled very similarly." Yeah, that shouldn't shock anybody.
Yeah.
The human beings have been trying to give expression to the human experience and been trying to name ultimate reality for a long time. Yeah.
So you talked already about science, ecology, other religions. You've covered some territory in one
What are we,
question.
3 questions?
That's
I had to make up for that hell's
all right.
bells denial there at the beginning.
I would wager a bet that that's an emerging understanding, that you've tripped over science, you've learned something here, you've heard something there, you've rubbed shoulders with someone different from yourself.
Interesting.
Can you talk to us about how that's all integrated and evolved and emerged for you? That sounds a bigger and broader story than perhaps what you may have started
Well,
with.
you know, when I was a kid, my parents would take us to church, and I would hear the Jesus stories, and I found them really compelling. So I didn't. So whenever there was a center and the center had pushed somebody to the edges, Jesus moved from the center to the edges. When he was asked a question, he generally responded with a question, like, "How do you read it? How do you interpret it?" So I, at an early age, that I liked that. It was almost like, you're going to have to sort this thing out. Everybody's going to have to sort it out for themselves.
Yeah.
So I never saw it as some sort of mind control, check your brain at the door. And I think my parents were also very, I don't know, intellectually restless, maybe. They were always reading things. And, hey, I remember my dad would tear out newspaper articles. You might find this really interesting. So the Jesus story, somehow it rang true to me at some level. And the insistence, because I lived in a hierarchical world. There were the kids who were cool, there were the kids who weren't, there were the good students, there were the good athletes. Everything was ranked in my world, and I was never at the top. And the Jesus story kept insisting there were other ways to rank. There were other things that were more important than what everybody had decided was important. And I distinctly remember 12, 13, 14, that to me was good news. That was like hopeful. So I didn't come through, I know a lot of people were like, had like a catechism or a denomination or like I heard these stories and they moved me at some deep level of the soul. And I didn't ever, but then I remember they would take us and we would go to a church service and I would think, this is supposed to be a gathering about the big things. Love, hope, grace, forgiveness. Why is it so boring? Seems like it takes more energy to make this boring than to let this run around the room and do its thing. So
how can we make love stagnant? How can we make hope bland?
So I just had some sense like this Jesus story is bigger and better and wider and deeper and more dangerous and subversive than the system that claims it. I remember there was a song by Prince called "The Cross." Don't cry, he is coming. Like this really sparse Prince song. I remember hearing that, it would have been probably high school, and thinking that there was more truth in that song. That just the idea somehow that some people over here have got it and everybody else doesn't was just ridiculous to me from a young age.
So it was always there, that sense that you can't claim this.
Yeah, and I remember I was in a band and somebody said, "Well, are you a Christian band?" And thinking that I don't even understand that question. And then I would meet people who were in a Christian band and who would say that, and I would think, "So you suck?" Because I just didn't understand the idea that so I would meet people who were very proud, and it was very important to them to be a part of this subculture, which I just didn't have any. I didn't ever understand that. So science or art or all that always seemed like it was all fair game. Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by your journey. To have moved into a space in which you start a church, as you do, and then a couple of years down the track, you look out and there's 10,000 people, and then you release books, and you didn't ever think you're an author, and all of a sudden you got books and video series, and you develop a popularity and a voice gathers that really enjoy what you're putting out. And then you put out a book with a ridiculously controversial title, Love Wins, which must be where you went wrong. I mean, what were you thinking? Love Wins. But you put out some ideas that were criticised and were unpopular to some of the circles that had previously gathered around you. You know?
Well, I think Love Wins came out in 2011. In 2002, probably 2002, I did a series of teachings on women's equality, how women should be free. Women should be free to do whatever they're here to do. Like, why is that? Because that's obvious. And a group of people within the church that we had started organized to have me removed. I would go speak places and there would be protesters out front. So by the time Love Wins came out, we were about a decade into protesters when I would speak places, people leaving.
So it was always part of your ministry, your pastor's DNA to be pissing people off, was it?
I remember doing a Christmas series of sermons against the war in Iraq at Christmas time.
That's a good time.
And just realizing that there was a layer below what people believe about their spiritual beliefs, but that there was this American religion of unfettered capitalism yoked with nationalism and patriotism, with an allegiance to the myth of redemptive violence and an inability to question military might and its unchecked use in the world. That was like heat like I'd never seen.
Right.
I mean, there are people whose kids weren't going to be home that Christmas because they were fighting in Iraq.
Yeah.
Did it get any harder to hold to what you believe, to hold to truth, to stay on that journey?
I mean, it always hurts to be misunderstood and have people say horrible things about you that aren't true, they've never met you. That hurts, period. Because I remember there was a church that I'd been the church that I worked at before I started the church, and they had written like a 7-page single-spaced paper against me, denouncing me. And a friend of mine was a pastor, and his church had written a paper against me. And I had asked, how long is your paper against Mein Kampf?
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't think that was funny.
The rise of Rob Bell's coming.
But just
quickly.
this bizarre world where people would not comment and say anything about actual bad things.
Yeah.
Your church has made no statements about human trafficking, but you have to have public meetings about this book. Like, what a house of cards. What a fragile thing.
So what do you perceive that to be about? Love Wins, that's your dominant drive. Come on, let's get on board where this is going. And there's protesters, there's hating, there's denouncing. Why does that happen for people, particularly people of faith?
The idea of a fullness of life that could be tasted and experienced right now was not what they were ever handed. So the moment somebody says, maybe you could rethink this, and perhaps there's something happening right now that you could be a part of, it's terrifying. The number of people, fancy pants Christian leaders, who have said, I'm totally with you, but I can't say anything.
Yeah.
That happens to me all the time.
Wow.
They're like these people in that world who are big shots, who are like, I am completely with you, but if I ever said anything, I'll lose my job.
Yeah. So
And
the
I'll-
system's mitigating against truth
right,
and freedom.
Like
and
some will just say it straight up. They don't even they even understand that it's that straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've heard it said not only for those people who are personally tied in and complicit in that system, but I've also heard it expressed a sense of distrust that actually our churches are spaces that are safe enough to hold differing ideas alongside each other. Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
for a lot of people, a different idea is terrifying. I saw it in other pastors that there was a party line, like the things you say that keep the money coming in and keep everybody, oh, good, pastor staying true. And I had met a number who were actually like, you know what, I'm reading this and I'm wondering about this and I have doubts about this and this new idea is just, but I can't say any of that. And I remember watching this split that they had like the things that they were dying to talk about, and then there was the game face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had seen that, and I remember the first couple of times, and I realized, oh, this is one of those moments where I either I either split, and then everything, and then the machine rolls on smoothly, or I choose not to remain split, and I only express which is true within me. And if I do that, that could go a bunch of different ways. And I distinctly remember, and Kristen and I would talk about this because we had this joke from Spinal Tap, that he's like, I could have sold shoes, would you like an 11? I think you might like an 11. When in doubt, I could just always go sell shoes. We had this ongoing discussion. Well, if you do that, that's gonna, who knows? A bunch of people might leave. A bunch of people, if you write that and thinking, no, this is how it works. And if you blow the whole thing up and everybody leaves, that's the better route than to be one more person who just checked out at some point. Yeah, that was a distinct thing.
Some of the ideas, for instance, we've mentioned love wins and so on, that you're naming and that you're putting out there. For you, that's just all part of.
Good Lord,
that's grounded in
there's
the broad
nothing
tradition.
New in the. I mean, love wins. I mean, I understand that the assembling of old information creates new information, but that's sort of basic information architecture. But no, that book, there's nothing new about those ideas. Those are firmly in the center of the Christian tradition for literally thousands of years. So I actually never saw myself. The word radical comes from the Latin radix. It means root. So a radish is a root vegetable. Like a radical isn't somebody who wandered off into the deep weeds. Somebody who went to the center. So I never saw that. I never saw it like there were these people in the center and then I wandered out into the edges and sort of, I don't know. I actually just think the center was the edges.
Interesting. So what helps you amongst all the noise, all the voices, what helps you go down as opposed to just stay on the surface to, what drags you down deeper into the center?
Jesus has this great line about, I came to bring you abundant or full or overflowing life. I think there's some from way back, like I wanted to live, and I wanted to really live, and I wanted to really taste, and I wanted to really feel. And if you really want to feel and be fully alive, then that means you're going to feel pain, you're going to feel your heart getting broken, and joy and euphoria and all of it. So something within me was, I think it's a great question. Somewhere along the way, I think my job was not to settle. My wife and I will often talk about the mission, like, because for us, this work, we have our kids, and then this work that she's very much at the center of. This work that we do, will just like the mission. And when we thought, what exactly is that? We're like, it's not settling. It's just following it to the center. It's whatever the next thing is. Where you're like, all right, let's go after that and see what that is, and see what it looks like. And then, I don't know, maybe 4 years from now, it'll be a book. Who knows? When I should probably back up. When the church started to grow, this feels like another lifetime, but there was this institution that needed to be led and managed, and it had budgets, and people wanted to know what the 5-year vision was, and I never had answers to any of that. I just couldn't. I'm so institutionally challenged. And the thing is, there were people who came there to work who were like great at it, and they would be like, okay, I got 17 action items, and I would just be in awe of that, because there are people who do that really well. And somehow it helped me clarify the only thing I ever knew how to do was keep going and then try and give language to what I had seen and experienced.
And the same process for belief, theology, understanding, just keep asking the next question, taking another step.
Yeah, there was no grand plan.
Yeah.
And I would be completely interested in an idea, and then I would just go down that rabbit hole for a while.
Yeah.
That's how it starts. It's like, seriously, it's just curiosity.
Yeah.
I had framed a question in preparation for this conversation around your journey from pastor of a massive church to now being beyond the church, or beyond the institutional church in that sense, no longer pastoring a particular congregation. Had one, using the New Testament image of stepping out of the boat, is that walking on waves?
It didn't. It just felt like the obvious next step. My friends and I would always talk about setting a table for the whole world. So, to me, getting people into a church building, always, it was like, that's the goal. There's got to be there. No, I just never found that to be the height of the thing, because the whole point of the thing seemed to be an announcement that the whole thing is a temple, which is generally, hey, you can go in, God can come out. And I actually think this is the thing at the heart of everything Jesus is doing that I think only a few people have really tuned into, but he comes to destroy the temple. So I think the apocalypse that he is speaking of isn't some left behind end of the world thing. I think he's talking about some of you alive will see it happen. I think he's talking about art and business and being a parent and having a garden and owning a shop and being a lawyer and being in healthcare. It's all holy. It's all sacred. We're all doing our part to make a new kind of world. So I got to the heart of a really large institution and was like, you can't. I mean, was on the payroll of a church. You can't get more the center. It was like there's nothing in the center. All it does is push you back out.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel because for many people it would be like, oh, you left the temple. No, I didn't leave the temple. I woke up to what I'd been preaching for years, which is that the whole thing's a temple. So now I get to create spaces. I get to go do my thing in spaces and watch people go have experiences in those spaces that are, to me, that's just joyous.
Yeah. But how do we do it? So church or gathering or, the gathering of witnesses, it seems that one of the problems is once we gather, we then need to protect against ideas we don't like or are out there. Or it seems that there's a curious energy that happens when we group. How do we actually gather, share life, do the sorts of things you're talking about, but maintain openness and spaciousness and don't become protective or defensive?
Well, if you have a firm center, then you don't need to spend your energy on border patrol. And oftentimes there isn't a firm center, so all you're left with is patrolling who's in, who's out. Is this good? Is this not? This is the power to me of Eucharist, which is a table with bread and wine where you serve each other and you're reminded of your belonging to a universal Christ body. Is if it's about a list, and for many people, especially in the Protestant tradition, it's 500 years and still protesting. The problem with the Protestant tradition for many people is it labeled it what you believe. So this group has their 9 and this group has their 11 statements and they have their 13 statements, which always will produce a group that's like, we only have one, man. We love our neighbor. We're not into all that complicated stuff. We just make it real simple. And then in response to somebody going, it's real simple, we just have one, somebody else goes, well, we take it more seriously. We have 19. We actually have a systematic list, and we'll spend 2 years teaching it to you. And so you just have this back and forth because it's always basically how is your intellectual furniture arranged in your head. The really beautiful thing to me about a table with bread and wine is that's an experience. Do you want to come to the table? It locates the center in the mystery of a resurrected Christ and not a propositional intellectual framework, which is just much more interesting. Now the issue is, do you want to come to the table? So I would just begin with, you're announcing good news, and then you're bringing people good news, whatever they need. So what does this community need? What are they? People are lonely. What people need education. What people are traumatized by crime. So we should bring them comfort and counseling, and let's bring them good news. I think you're seeing more and more of that. There's like a playful seriousness. Oh, what would it look like to bring good news? Okay, let's do that then. All right, okay. And I think especially there's an empowered realization that you can do this, and it's what the world needs, and it brings you great joy. So the whole how do you protect, or how do you, I think you put something beautiful in front of people and let that be the thing. That I remember years ago we were helping out at an urban school, getting people kids mentors in this one family from the suburbs, white family with 2 white daughters. They were helping out at this urban school, and there was a young man that the dad was tutoring, and they got to really know and love this kid. And they had an opportunity to adopt him. And their friends in their small town were freaking out. Like, you can't bring this African-American kid into your home with your daughter. You can't. And the daughters sat the parents down and said, either adopt him or stop taking us to this church where we hear these kinds of ideas about changing the world.
Brilliant.
I love it. I love the idea of these girls going, don't expose us
Yeah.
to this vision of the world.
Yeah.
Or then do the next right thing.
Yeah. Either live it or shut up about it.
That's it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm Beryl, and I'm a Rotarian. Reading the Old Testament is worse than when I watch Game of Thrones. I've been going to my church for 70 years. I tried once to cleanse my chakra, but I must have dozed off. Are we really inherently sinful or fallen? I once dated a man whom I could well believe came from money. And of course, hip-hop music led on to crunk. I don't mind the nudity. I always park in the same spot. I watch the news on TV or read it on my smartphone. I sit in my same seat. Snaps to you, sweetie.
That's right. It's time for Beryl's Advocate.
Now, Robert, I've seen you on daytime television with that Oprah Winifred woman. I normally doze off in the afternoon when she's on, but your energy and enthusiasm kept me awake for the whole show. Plus, you're a bit of a spunk. Since appearing, some people have been saying you've moved from being a pastor to more of a self-help guru. How does a faith that's focused on unlocking the best life I can live connect with all the need and pain in our world? And will you be giving away any cars at your shows?
Well, Beryl, the really interesting idea is that you could be fully alive, and you could know who you are and what you're doing here, and that you fully alive would be really good for the world. And you working through your pain and wounds and family of origin issues and whatever else is lurking in there, you experiencing freedom and healing and good news, you transcending and including, moving beyond and yet allowing your past to be healed, is actually good for the world. And that the goodness and the love and joy that would be welling up within you might spill over into the people around you. That's actually possible, I think. And I think that when people say the word self-help in a derogatory way, it is an intuitive sense that this thing this person is after is dead ends with them. Like they're just in it so they can be happy. But I think that everything is connected with everything else. That, what's it say in Romans? That God who is over all, through all, and within all, this idea of the interconnectivity of all things. And so I think that's the reason why in your well-crafted question, the derisive use of the word self-help was sniffing out that sometimes it appears like it's just this person and it's all about them, which at certain moments in our life, developmentally, all we have the capacity for is our own healing. The problem is when it stops there. And the good news announcement is that you can heal and be more and more fully alive, and that will move you into serving and giving and loving and generosity to others. And that's really interesting. So I try and help people wake up to who they are and what they're doing here. And I find discussions of labels and categories and titles so boring. I just want to, it's just so boring. Because I think that at the end of the day, you just do your work and you just go about doing your work. Let other people argue about what exactly you are.
I'm Faith, and I'm 5. Guinea pigs like peace. The Bible was really heavy. If only the world was made of love. I feel sad for children who are refugees. I once saw a Christmas tree being put to death. I say my prayers with my eyes open. I don't think there should be rich churches when there are poor people. I saw a book once with drawings in it about falling in love. I think you have to have eggs. Everybody loves baby Jesus, even my sister and both my cousins. But I love the 3 wise men because they bought presents. Daddy says that the story of the universe is a really big story that is billions of years old. Would my little story make a difference in the universe's big story?
What a great question. First off, I love that your dad is talking to you about a universe that's billions of years old. I love that your dad has had his mind blown by what we're learning about the universe, and he's passing that wonder and awe along to you. So how great is that? And now they say that our universe is a place that is continuing to expand, and that every point within the universe is expanding. So, I don't know, my 45-year-old brain and your 5-year-old brain can get blown together on that one. So the real mystery, and I mean this in like the big universe-wide mystery sense, is that you and I get to participate in this universe that's billions of years old. That we get to try and help people. We get to make whatever it is we're here to make. You can grow up and have a family. You can become a scientist. You can teach history in a school. You can plant a garden. You can open a business. That, to me, is the power of a universe that's billions of years old, is that means there are billions of possibilities. So if you begin with your wonder and joy and curiosity, who knows who you might impact? And that's worth trying, if you ask me.
Would you do anything different now with where you've got to in your understanding of the world, God, biology, ecology, how it all fits together? Would you do anything different in bringing up your kids in terms of faith framework understanding, and maybe even just a broader comment around what do people do in terms of offering kids something when a lot of the Christian story has proven to be unhelpful for some kids? They've ended up having to unpack it and deconstruct it and get rid of it.
Yeah,
what do we
funny.
do with
I just
kids?
released a project called Launching Rockets, 17 observations on being a parent.
Cool.
So I just put out this 3-hour audio series on observations about this very question. First off, a lot of people ask, like, what am I supposed to teach my kids? And I always begin with, you're always teaching your kids. And sometimes you're using words. So if I ask you, did your parents' marriage work for them? Did they see life as a trial to be endured or an adventure to go on? Did they settle? Like, everybody can answer those questions. So your kids will be able to answer those questions about you. So the greatest gift you give your kids is to be fully alive. A woman at an event I did recently raised her hand. She stood up and she said, I have a question. You know, I have doubts. I don't have the whole thing sorted out. And my kid was asking me questions. Should I, is it okay that I share with my kid what I'm going through? And I just said, is there any greater gift you could give your kid? And then my wife and I have this from a long time. We've had this, one of our jobs is to give our kids as little as possible to unlearn. So if you think it's lame or toxic or not helpful, then why would you ever enroll your kids in it? And sometimes people are doing things and have their kids involved in things because somewhere along the way they're like, well, I guess this is what you're supposed to do. If you can't explain its benefits now, How will your kid later? And sometimes people have their kids doing things simply because they don't want to have to say to neighbors, friends, family, parents, we're yanking our kid out of that school, that program, that whatever. And so this is about their issues. And that your child is not a bucket into which you pour your unresolved anxieties about your life, the world, or your kid's future. So when you work through your own things, your home, because you're creating space, it's your home becomes a place that's just that much more non-reactive, peaceful. And so oftentimes the parent's anxiety about the kid is actually their own anxiety about their own path. And then it's interesting, Exodus 12, Exodus 13, when your kid asks you, why do we observe the Passover? What does it mean? Say to them. So in the ancient mindset, your job was to teach your kid how to ask questions. And the assumption was that your kids would ask questions, and the questions were about meaning. And meaning is like the oxygen of the soul. It never goes away. That was the deal. And a friend of mine, Rabbi Joel, who our daughters play together and we hang out and we have so much fun. The other day we were talking about this, and I was like, so there's no body of information that you're like sort of on edge. You got to get into your daughters. And he's like, the only thing is teaching them how to ask questions. He's like, that's it. I was like, so there's no like 9 points? He's like, 9 points? What are you talking about? He's like, the whole thing as a rabbi is teaching the kids how to ask questions. He's like, we have classes on how to ask questions at the synagogue. So I've often met parents who have some fear, anxiety, paranoia that there's a body of stuff that they're supposed to get into their kid. So sometimes I'll say like, what do you mean? They'll say, well, like the Bible stories, to which I've learned now just to say, which Bible stories? The important ones. Like what important ones? Like Jonah and the fish and David and Goliath and Jesus healing people. How have those stories shaped you? I've never had a parent who had that anxiety who had answers to those. Yeah, interesting. Or they'll say, well, like the doctrines, the important beliefs, like which ones? Well, like, I've never had a parent who had that anxiety actually give a coherent or clear or articulated answer. Interesting. So you realize this is an amorphous anxiety about something that someone told you. So this is about you owning things. It has nothing to do with your kid. This is you having some sense like there was something that you were supposed to get or do. You haven't gotten or done it, and now you want to make sure that your kids get or done it. And if it's truly something that you have completely missed out on, but you don't want your kid to miss out on, then why not do it with them? Yeah. I know people who went to a church and adults and volunteered to teach Sunday school because they never had been to Sunday school and they realized they didn't know anything, so they just went with their kid. Now that's interesting. Yeah. If that's somehow within you something. But most of the parenting stuff is generally about your own, it's your own anxieties.
But you could expand that out. That's also true about the village of church in general, that our youth leaders are anxious or feel that anxiety to pass it on to young people in the church, and the elders in the church want to pass it on to the newcomers in the church, and so on. Would you agree?
Oh, wow. I never thought about it that way. I do know there's this ancient phrase, every table is an altar. The center is the table in the home. That's the center of life. Because when you eat, you're reminded of this gift of provision, and you sit around the table and you talk and you tell stories, talk about your day, you listen and learn from each other. And that the community was understood to merely, even ideally, if you had some sort of community, it would simply reinforce whatever it was that the kid was picking up from you, the parent. So every table's an altar. And this idea among some that you sort of farm things out to somebody somewhere is like, no. And the way that you teach your kid is you spend time with them as you walk along. You're in traffic and they see when you get angry. They see you in a fight with your partner. They see you stressing over money. Like, they see how you handle the world. That's how your kid learns.
Scary thought.
My daughter's 7, and TSA, you have TSA here? In America, TSA is like the security that you have to go through to
Airport
get.
security. Yep.
And in America, it's bonkers. And I got angry the other day at the TSA agent for this ridiculous dehumanizing Patriot Act nonsense. I got angry. And my daughter, 2 days ago, we were talking about it. My 7-year-old daughter was like, yeah, Dad got really angry and like dropped his bag on the floor. And it was so great to like relive the experience with my daughter. And she was like processing, Dad got angry at TSA. Because I don't really get angry much. But when I do, I'm like,
you drop your bag.
You drop spitting nails. And I was like, this is how it works, as you talk about it. And sometimes you get angry.
I was just going to say, the thing I appreciate most about your work, and particularly Everything is Spiritual Too, which is a cracker and free on YouTube, which, we love all the more.
Oh, that means the world. Great.
Stunning. And particularly I love, your work has helped do some deconstruction stuff around what gets in the way of love, and it helps us move past that which isn't helpful. But more importantly, your work, for me, points us towards something. It helps us think about and show us what we're for. How would you articulate what it's for, where it's going, what it's all about?
That the whole thing is moving to greater complexity, unity, and depth. That the whole thing is actually an epiphenomenon, also called emergent phenomenon or holism, which is simply that the parts, when added together, create something new that has qualities that can't be located at the earlier component level. So you put a bunch of atoms together and you get a molecule. But the molecule contains properties that aren't present with any of the atoms. And so what you have now is this realization that you put a bunch of cells together, which is a collection of molecules. You put together a bunch of cells and you get systems, and these systems eventually emerge and formed a human being. So you are this collection of cells and that made these systems, and yet you also contain you. And the most central elements of you, your personality, your life, your opinions, your weirdness, your quirks, we cannot identify those in your physical body, and yet they are central to the essence of who you are. So to me, the fact that the universe continues to move forward, because human beings are a relatively new phenomenon, 13 billion years into a 13.8 billion year phenomenon. And then this question of, well, is the universe done, or is there something new that hasn't yet emerged? And whatever that would be, it would be human beings making up something. What do we make up? And I think this is what the New Testament mystics were talking about, this body of Christ, this cosmic, universal body of humanity that somehow we all together form something new the universe hasn't seen before. To me, it's like the question. It's the question, and it's because all of your greatest moments of love, joy, and peace have always been moments when you were somehow connected with others. And so when we talk about we're one, and we're all in this together, and when someone on the other side of the world hurts, we all hurt, and to kill one person is to kill all of humanity. These are all ways we have been witnessing to the interdependence of what it means to be a human being. And that's that's crazy. And that's crazy. Really, really intoxicating. And that there is some sort of joy animating the whole thing. That's just, to me, really interesting.
Yeah.
And I know that anybody hearing this immediately has long lists of all the things that are wrong with the world. But I remember, I was in a village in sub-Saharan Africa where 27% of the people in the village are HIV positive. Whereas like little 5-year-old kids. Well, I remember seeing a 5-year-old boy who was the man of the house because everybody older than him had died. And he was caring for his 3 and 2 and 1-year-old siblings. It's stuff where you don't even have, your brain doesn't even know how to compute. And yet I've seen such beauty and holiness in settings, it just makes no sense. It makes no sense that in that situation you would see things that or the things that have stuck with me for years. So I've just seen way too much suffering that had other things lingering around the edges of it. So I've just seen way too many things that on paper you'd be like, now that would make you just want to end it all. And yet it wasn't. It's just like tapping into another dimension. The whole thing is way more upside down and weird than anybody thought. Yeah. And I'm in it.
Yeah.
Rob Bell, thank you so much for coming Beyondering.
I loved it. It's great. It's great questions.
You guys are what? You didn't finish
Yeah.
that sentence.
You guys are great questions.
Yes, we are.
You guys are great questions.
Coming up next episode of Beyondering, we try on the lens of research with American author, speaker, and independent researcher Diana Butler Bass.
You know, I discovered that sometimes people with right doctrine talk a good game, but then act really poorly. And the people who don't necessarily have that same kind of doctrinal precision are busy doing the right thing.
Diana is author of 9 books, including her most recent book, Grounded, a fantastic book, and one that's actually featuring as the first book in the Beyondering Book Club, Book, Line and Thinker.
That's right, and you can join Book, Line and Thinker at our website, www.beyondering.com.au. It's not too late to join us on a journey of exploration and stretching that will last you 1 year, but will impact you for a lifetime.
And while you're on our website, check out our live events that we're rolling out once per month, a whole range of different activities where fellow Beyonderers will be getting together.
While you're at our website, you can become a Beyonder backer for as little as $3 a month. Why not help keep this show on the road and help us stretch out to new ventures, new ideas, and new frontiers?
So join us next time when we take you Beyondering.